Hello and welcome back to the Transfer Flow podcast. It's me, your host, Patrick Van Straten, and I'm joined by Ravi Ramaneni. How are you, Ravi?
I'm good, Patrick. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Looking forward to another day of transfer news. It's always fun to get your expert opinion on things.
Yeah, it's always fun to talk to you. You have great ideas and thoughts as well. Yesterday, I think here, MLS transfer window closed for incomings. So I think we can do, as we talked about it, we can do another episode. We can go over some of the kind of the inner workings of how things work in MLS for international transfers. I think that would be a good, and then also look at some of the players they brought in this window. And the other bit of information here is that I think there is pretty much confirmation that Pochettino is going to be the new coach for U.S. national team, men's national team. So that'd be an interesting to see how that when they announce it, if they're going to announce it today or this week, it'll be an interesting. It's a big hire. It's a very big hire for the federation.
Yeah, that is a huge hire for any national team, and it really feels like a statement. I'm also intrigued about it because Pochettino football, I'm not sure how well it transfers to not seeing your players for most of the year. But it'll be really good to talk about MLS with you. It feels like there's a lot of money going in and out at the moment. And for those who don't know, Ravi helped build the analytics operation at Seattle Sounders, obviously helped make them one of the most successful outfits in MLS. And now we've got him here to give us his behind-the-scenes take, his expert take on the transfer news of this summer. So should we get straight into it, Ravi?
Yeah, let's go.
So Manchester United, back in the news. Ligt and Mazraoui joining on a joint deal, or joining at the same time, from Bayern Munich. It looks like it's a combined fee of about 60 million euros plus another 10 in add-ons, 45-15 in favour of Ligt there. Ligt's 25, Mazraoui is 26. Both Ajax guys to join the host of other Ajax guys there. You know, you've got Martinez, you've got Anthony, you've even got Eriksson, now I think about it. Though not a Ten Hag guy. What are your initial thoughts on this move?
Well, I think, just looking at De Ligt first, I think it's a great signing. My first reaction was, okay, this is what I was looking for from Manchester United, a signing like this for the centre-back position. One, because if you look at his career, he's only 25. 25 is, centre-backs usually peak a little later than the other positions just because of the position and the amount of learning that they have to do in terms of reading the game and all that. But De Ligt has been playing at a very high level for a long time. He's played in multiple Champions League semi-final rounds, which I think he's at the age 25 for multiple clubs. I think that's pretty good. That's pretty top level. I think this is the type of player they need to anchor that defense, along with Lisandro Martinez. And now, going back to your point about Ajax, both Mazraoui and De Ligt, they played for Ten Hag for a full season, at Ajax. So playing on the right side of the defense, Mazraoui as the right back and De Ligt as the right center back. So I do think that brings a lot of familiarity, and in a zone like the back line, having that familiarity and connection or understanding, that really helps to avoid some of the communication errors and mistakes as they build this team back into a Champions League places, and eventually as a title contender. And also this makes the Lenny Euro signing, the one we discussed a few weeks ago, I think it puts more emphasis on the fact that now they have this center-back group of Martinez, De Ligt, Lenny Euro, and there is still Lindelof and Maguire. So I think we mentioned one of the things with pushing Euro as a starter right away was that he might make some mistakes as he learns the league, and are they ready to absorb those mistakes while he realizes his potential. Now we know with this move, he doesn't have to be that 30-game starter. right away. Now, he's also injured for the next 2 months, so it's a moot point. But I think now this group looks a lot more well-balanced. They can even play a line of three if they wanted to, playing three center backs. But I think just playing De Ligt and Martinez, they both complement each other very well in terms of their skills. I think so. I think it's a very good signing.
Yeah, I think that this makes an awful lot of sense. And yeah, it feels like profile-wise, De Ligt has a lot of similarities to Yoro, because Yoro is not a front foot defender. He prefers to drop off. Feels like he's a good partner for Martinez in that regard. And De Ligt is also relatively conservative, I would say. What he hasn't turned into is the sort of phenomenal passing centre-back that we thought he might do when he was incredibly young and an above-average passer at Ajax. I'd say he's ended up being pretty good.
He's a pretty
certainly
good
enough for United. Yeah, he's like certainly good enough for United. Martinez is going to be the outstanding passer in that back line.
And he brings the height and some of the aerial prowess that I think Martinez lacks because of his stature. But then he's also he's a big threat on attacking set pieces now. Like if you look at him, and so those are things that between him and Martinez, and so Martinez can help with the playing out, but De Ligt is pretty good also playing with his feet. Not as good as Martinez, but now you have two options. And then I think in the last season he played as a right-sided center back in a line of three at Bayern, quite a bit towards. So that's another way that if they choose to play, where they play a third center back, that could also work. I think he could be very good there. He can play through pressure. That's one thing that when I watched him a bit, he does not, like, he may make mistake, but he doesn't really get hurried in pressure. That's another, I think when we talked about Lenny Yoro, we mentioned that too, is that one of the things with him is that his passing range seemed a bit limited, but under pressure, he doesn't panic, which I think is a very good fundamental piece to build on top of. And in terms of the complementary nature between him and Martinez, I think De Ligt is also, as you said, he's not a front foot defender, so he can get into a tackle and get into a duel with attackers. But I think if it were his choice, he would probably not want to. I think that's the type I would see him as. More of let the game come to him rather than somebody that goes in, tries to put out a fire. I think that would be more Martinez doing that.
Yeah, I think so. And that's good. I mean, it feels like it's playing to their natural strengths. I also just think probably you're going to look a bit better as a centre-back next season at United anyway, assuming they get in a proper ball winner in midfield. If one of your centre-backs looks error-prone, they're probably error-prone. But if all your centre-backs look dodgy, then I think there's probably an issue higher up the pitch.
Yeah.
And that's how it feels for Man United. The defence was so bad last season that you think this is a team issue, this is a manager issue, rather than, we just need to swap out this player for that player and everything will go away. So in that sense, I kind of think De Ligt should have an okay life there. And he's rangy, big, like you say, really good price, reliably fit as well. For a guy who's been out of favour at Bayern and out of favour at Juventus, he's played a lot of minutes over the last few years.
Yeah, he's definitely played a lot. Last season, he had a few injuries. I think that kind of missed, probably the first time he missed a little bit of a significant amount of time. But I think otherwise, he's a very highly available player. That's one of the first things I see with players that you spend so much money on. First thing is that can they actually play 40, 45, 50 games? That's what you are planning for. So yeah, he's availability wise, I don't think there are any issues here. And the age is great age at 25 for a centre back, but he's just entering his prime.
So that's an interesting point to move on to Mazraoui, I think, because Mazraoui has played considerably less. Last 4 seasons averaged kind of 1,200 minutes, 1,300 minutes a season. Bit more of a gamble here, but low fee, can play both sides, also has Champions League experience, like you say, has has that history with Ten Hag, has that history with De Ligt. I don't know if he would have played with Antony as well ahead of him. So I guess that's somebody ahead of him on the wing who he might have a relationship with too. This one feels like the price makes it okay. If it were more than this, I think I'd have more reservations. Even though I look at Mazraoui and when he's on the pitch, there's a really broad, varied skill set here, right?
Yeah. He's very attack minded, very creative player, very combinative, combines with the attackers, and he's not afraid to go inside. Like he can go and rotate inside and let the midfielder or the winger go wide, and so so that also means that he can play higher and play on the opposite side, so he can come inside from the left side. So I think the biggest concern with him for me is his availability. I think that's the biggest concern. So and the other part is that the second one, I would say concern wise, like he's not if you're talking about fullback, he's not a defense first fullback. I think he's more a creative attacker. Like maybe wing back is his best position because you release him of some of his duties. Funnily enough, they were playing together at Bayern too, right? Like he was playing with De Ligt. So he is definitely someone that's more attack minded, and I think that 1v1 defending, he gets beat quite easily. When I watched him, this is obviously like not, I don't have the physical data, but he can get up to quite good speed as a fullback, as a player playing on the outside, but he doesn't seem to have the burst in the first 2-3 steps to accelerate as much as some of the more kind of elite wide players can do. What that means is that he ends up defending wise, when somebody makes a move on him, attacker just does like a shimmy or a just changes direction, it takes him a couple of steps to catch up. So you'll see that he'll end up doing a lot of little last minute type tackles, like slide tackles, and he's pretty good at them. Like I think he does well for the most part. But that's something that as he ages, I think if he loses a little bit of like a fraction of a second late on some of those could turn into yellow cards, right? So that's what I see with him. But attacking wise, he's really good at running into space to receive the ball. Anything attack related, I would just say he's really good. Like he's going to add a lot to that team. Now, he definitely complements in terms of skills a little bit with Diego Dalot, who's more, I think, defensive. If you or definitely compared to Mazraoui, more defensively sound. So it could be one of those where they have Mazraoui's. You could do things where he starts the game and you're united. So if you're in lead, you either take him out in the last 25, 30 minutes, or take out the winger, push Mazraoui up, and then put on Diego Dalot to kind of seal that side. Yeah. So that one, that's something. And then with the combination of him, let's say if United play a back four with De Ligt on the right side, and then Mazraoui on the as a right back, they might have some. The midfielders need to be very defensive. The defensive midfielders will have a lot of work to, because I think Mazraoui, once the ball turns over, he'll be caught upfield more often than not. So you need that defensive midfielder to slide in and help them to win the ball back.
It's interesting though, because United have really struggled for that right wing role, and you sort of wonder whether Mazraoui's attacking instincts might be part of the solution to that. That maybe this season they think about Lisandro Martinez starting as a left back and then flexing into a back three, which also might cover for maybe Lenny Yoro if he plays as the central centre back, or even if you have to use Maguire, where his best performances have really been in the centre of a back three, and then you can push Mazraoui on with a little bit less of a worry. But yeah, it kind of feels like if they get in Ugarte or whoever it ends up being in defensive midfield, that person is going to have to be comfortable shifting over to the right side to maybe box out some attackers there, because Mazraoui's going to need... You don't want Mazraoui facing attackers in the open field much.
No, you don't want. I think that's not good news.
Yeah, but these are good deals. These are good deals done at good prices for players who are like a perfectly good age. Sensible, I would say, market value to maybe slightly below. Finally, nice to see United doing this sort of thing. So we can continue with Bayern outgoings for the time being, I think, because another name on the market right now is Kinglsey Coman, reportedly available for a loan, linked with Arsenal and Barcelona. Obviously, Barcelona now managed by his former coach, Hansi Flick. Arsenal looking for somebody who can give them some depth on the wings after deciding not to go for Nico Williams. It feels like Coman is quite an interesting prospect in this regard. Obviously, he's had a strange career in that it's all been spent at the top level. It's been hugely successful in terms of trophies. When he gets on the pitch, he's been highly effective, but he's always injured. He said he's considered retirement several times because the injuries have been so bad. And obviously now it's hard to tell how much of it is selection versus injury, but you look across the last few years and it feels like 15, 16 90s is kind of what you expect out of Kinglsey Coman a season. To me, that straight away says maybe this is worth it for Arsenal, depending on the price. Definitely not worth it for Barcelona.
Yeah, and also Barcelona just got Dani Olmo too, which
who they can't register.
Oh, okay. Well, which I think that's the kind of a recurring theme with Barcelona. Anyway, coming back to Coman, really good player. Love watching him play. As you said, when he's on the pitch, he's really effective, very effective player. He's got a lot of tools. Like, he's a creative passer. He can come inside. Really good crosser of the ball. Occupies the cutback zones and then, cuts back from there. Like, very good. High box occupation. Like, he gets more box. Like, he's one of the top guys in Bundesliga in terms of attacking midfielders that get touches inside the box. He's like 98th percentile. He also takes a good amount of shots. I would say that's where I wish he was a little bit more discreet when he's taking those shots from outside the box. When he gets into the box, he gets into really good situations. Those shots are all pretty good, not just because he's inside the box, but the way he gets those shots, because it's a run in behind, or like it's a give and go and he gets in there. So you're always in really good situations when he gets those shots inside the box. But when he's shooting from outside, it's usually a little bit wild and,
I was looking at something like that today, and I saw that, a few years ago his average XG per shot was kind of 11, like 0.11, 0.12. So basically 11% chance, 12% chance of becoming a goal, and now it's crept down to 0.08, and that's significantly below league average at this stage, right? So you're looking at a guy who's getting shots for an elite side, but they're not the best.
Yeah, and so what's like, and I think last year he got 8 goals out of 4.5 xg, and you watch them and you see why. But as I said, like, when he gets into the box, like, he gets really good attempts, and that's more because of how he gets there. So I think him playing, and I think it happens often with inverted wingers, inverted attackers, is if you play him on that inverted side, then you get a lot more undisciplined shots, like, just because they can shoot from their inside foot from a little bit outside the box. But with him, he does that from both sides pretty evenly. I think getting him into crossing situations and really good at creating chances for others, I think that's where he adds maximum value. And as you mentioned, his availability is a major issue, so you can't count on him for more than maybe 20 matches a season, and he's also subbed out pretty often. Like 80% of the matches he's out, he's taken out around 60. For his entire career, like a rough average, he plays about 60 minutes when he starts. So that's not very high. But I think if you're talking about a role that, let's say, Arsenal is looking for a depth piece that can play those 10 or 15 matches and give high quality output, he's a really good piece to have on loan. Because I think his contract expires in 27, so it's still ways away. Like, so it's not something. It's a 1 year left kind of deal, but it's something that he maybe change of scenery might help him, and also change of training regime. Everything might also help him to be reduce some of the injuries.
Sure. I think he's it's like you say, that the ability to get the ball from the attacking third into the box is really remarkable with him. You know, Saka, between passes and carries into the box, he's at about 4.5 a game, which is very, very good. And Coman was at 5.3 last season. Now, admittedly, playing for such a territorially dominant side. And Bayern, despite not winning the Bundesliga, I mean, their expected goal difference in the Bundesliga last season was hilarious. Like, it was like +2 a game. But the thing, there are lots of questions here about the financial burden, right? So if Bayern insist on a loan with an obligation to buy, you don't really want to do that. If you're going to cover all his wages, another big question. If there's a high loan fee, another big question. But I think for Arsenal, there are lots of ways this does make sense. Like, firstly, as much as Arsenal fans may want them to go out and spend a fortune on a Nico Williams type, it makes sense, I think, to want to play Martinelli as much as possible. I mean, Ryan O'Hanlon wrote an excellent article for ESPN, I think that came out today, which talked about why City might not be favourites for the Premier League title this season. And he said, you know, Martinelli had 20 non-penalty goals and assists 2 years ago. Then last season, the underlying numbers were just as good, but ball didn't go net. So this season, you'd expect it to rebound. And he's 23, which is often an age when attackers kick on. Martinelli, weirdly, has become one of these players who Arsenal fans think can be upgraded and non-Arsenal fans seem to think is kind of rubbish. And yet I've always adored this guy and felt like he was maybe now not as good a prospect as Saka, but for a minute there, it felt like they were kind of neck and neck, just different sorts of players. So having a guy who doesn't take that role from Martinelli, but who can spot him, who's got experience in the Champions League, who is essentially a guy who can give you 60 good minutes, like against any opponent, feels like a sensible thing. And there's also the sense that, yes, the money is important, but Arsenal are getting to a stage. Well, I don't know. The squad's young, so they've got time. But Arsenal are getting to the stage where you think we've got to go for it while we've got this unit together. We've got to go for it while we've got all these players, none of whom have had significant injury history in their past, and who are all peak, just about pre-peak. You know, like, it feels like Arsenal now do need to go for it. And especially, you think, if City get a points deduction this year, maybe Arsenal just need to do a couple of these moves and really make it happen for sure.
Yeah, and a move like this won't mortgage the future.
Yeah.
Also, just so you still have your options, assuming that they can get the terms in terms of the loan the way they want it. It definitely keeps options open for them next season when let's say this doesn't work out or this works out, but they still don't want to pay the full fee to make it a permanent deal because he's 28. So this is if the fee can't be that high as his career progresses. So yeah, I think it's better. I would suggest, or I would recommend something like this more than getting someone like a Nico Williams at the top of the price. And and that would probably hamstring you for the next move. Again, there's always no transfer is a guarantee. So whether you spend 60 million or 100 million, like, or 5 billion, like, there is no guarantee. Obviously, there is a range of probabilities you're talking about. But this seems like somebody that's proven, has played played in a lot of the games that Arsenal wants to play, like Champions League semifinals and finals type games.
Sure.
And so, like, that's to me, it's a very good signing if they can do it.
And he's not the only 28-year-old Arsenal are looking at right now. We should talk about Mikel Merino as well. Arsenal apparently in formal talks for him, have had a bid rejected, apparently. Sociedad want quite a bit. Sociedad apparently want £30 million. I think that's too much. Arsenal, I think, probably want to do about 20 mil. I also don't think it's the end of the world if you do a slight overpay on this. I also don't think that he's like the only player you can target in this position. You know, obviously Ted was pushing the Fabian Ruiz agenda. It kind of feels that if PSG want to sell Fabian Ruiz, you could probably get him for sub 30 mil. But
yeah,
it's an interesting fit if we assume that he takes that left 8 role at Arsenal, right, which is a little bit higher up. It's a role where you're expected to play. You're expected to help recycle the ball, do a little bit of creative passing, and be extremely aggressive. What do you think about Merino for that role?
I think he will. Yeah, when I watch him and I look at his numbers, I think he's very much like a advanced 8 type player that can play deeper. Also, I mean, he played for Spain, but ahead of Rodri with Fabian Ruiz a couple of games in the Euros, and you could see his style there. He's very tall for that position, and so he brings some other things like aerial prowess and also danger on set pieces. But in terms of being very aggressive, counter press, win the ball back higher up, and then just pass it on to other attacking midfielders, I think he fits that role to a T. I think he's very good with that. He looks a little awkward because of his height, the way he runs, and it doesn't look as smooth as some of the other midfielders, but he's very effective. I mean, and you don't walk into Spain starting lineup and play in the Euros without having certain level of technical ability and about the others. And you could see he's also played ahead of, we talked about Zubimendi in the last couple of podcasts. He plays ahead of Zubimendi at La Real. But I think his role, he can drop a little deeper and occasionally help with the build-up. Like he can drop into like the double pivot and be that player. But more often than not, I think he's more comfortable higher up the field. Like you mentioned, if the left side at 8 in Arsenal, I think that could be a great role for him. With him being tall, there is also this other advantage that I've seen La Real do a few times, is that you can hit like a direct ball to him in the build-up sometimes, just to as a change of pace instead of always having to play out, and then he can bring it down and then start the play. So there is also he brings a few things like that to the table.
Yeah, I did see. I saw some Arsenal fans comparing this to Marouane Fellaini, and I was kind of like, oh, I hate that comparison, but there's a little bit of justice in it, I guess. He's a much more technical player, but it does feel like last season, Arteta loved the fact that Havertz gave them that option. Because when you look at the rest of Arsenal's attackers, Trossard, Martinelli, Jesus, Saka, Odegaard, nobody there is a big physical presence. Like, they're not guys you can hit the direct ball to. And this gives you a 6'2" guy who's kind of between the midfield and the attack. Who can drop deeper, as you say, like in his youth, much more of I wouldn't call him a 6, but, we saw him, he previously had more progressive passes, more defensive actions. Now it's more shots, more touches in the box, fewer final third
so he was more
entries.
in a double pivot previously. I think that was when he had more of that progression metrics, but now he plays exclusively higher for the most part of the games.
And for Sociedad as well, who, as we know, they're the hardest pressing side in Spain by passes per defensive action. They, I think they were second in Spain for tackles won in the final third last season. So they are a counter pressing side that try and pen you in.
Yeah,
and
he closes space down pretty quickly once the ball turns over. That's another kind of good aspect to his game. That would be very helpful.
I think that there was a chart that went round that had players. It was duels won. Both aerial and ground duels won in Europe's top 5 leagues last season. And number 1 was Mikel Merino. And I think often there's a lot of nonsense on football Twitter, but I bet Mikel Arteta has seen this chart. And I bet he thought he's coming out of Sociedad. He's a big boy. Yeah. He wins a ton of duels. This is my guy. Yeah. So I like it. He's obviously much less of a silky, creative, and I would say flexible player than Fabian Ruiz, but he's kind of a bruiser. And Arsenal, it does really feel like Arteta, while he was trying to improve Arsenal's quality on the ball. It feels like that's always number one priority for him when he signs a player. How good are they on the ball? Secondary consideration is their physical abilities. For a long time, he played in those Arsenal teams who got bullied quite a lot, the Wenger sides. And it feels like now he's like, that's never going to happen again. So we're playing 4 centre-backs. They're all massive. We've got Declan Rice. He's huge. We're going to put another guy in there, and we'll leave some small guys in attack to do the kind of nimble, creative stuff. I think this makes a lot of sense. I wouldn't do the full 30 mil. If it gets to that, I think that you can probably maybe squeeze Sociedad by being interested in a couple of other guys. But actually, for the role that Arsenal want, for the style that they play, this one I think does make quite a bit of sense, and I think it would certainly improve Arsenal in a lot of the big games, especially. I think.
Yeah, and I think it adds level depth as well as a quality depth, not just as a starter, but even if you want to rotate that position. So yeah, for me, this is a very good, even at 30, if you want to extend maybe some add-ons or some way of like spreading that out, maybe they can do some stuff that I'm sure they're working on, things like that right now.
Sure.
So yeah, this sounds very, very good signing if they could pull this off.
And I can't imagine the wages would be crazy. Should we move on to Liverpool then? Because Liverpool are also Liverpool are thinking about wages, thinking about contracts, because they've got 3 stars, and you would probably argue the 3 stars of this team, all with a year left to go on their deals. There's Mohamed Salah. Deal is up next year, obviously been heavily linked with Saudi Arabia. There's Virgil van Dijk, who we haven't really heard rumours about an exit, but was the one reliable presence for them in defence last season and kind of held it together by himself. And you've got Trent Alexander-Arnold, the most interesting of all of them, because he's peak age. He's been linked with Real Madrid. With Klopp leaving, it feels like maybe there's smoke there. Now, the interesting thing here is that I think we all have a very high opinion of Liverpool's kind of backroom staff, their operation generally. So is it surprising to you that these 3 guys have all got to this stage in their contracts, Ravi?
I think, first of all, I would say that just because we haven't seen or heard doesn't mean they're not working on this. So I think that's something that we need to acknowledge. I think one thing we've seen with Liverpool or some of the more buttoned-up clubs is that a lot of times the most important information doesn't leak until the last minute or doesn't come out. So this could be one of those where they are in talks with all of them, and something might get announced in the next few months. Who knows? Now, leaving that aside, obviously we're now working off of the assumption that, okay, what do we think of these 3 guys? I think all 3 are slightly different cases. In some ways, very different cases. I think Mo Salah, to me, with the interest from the Saudi Arabia, I'm sure they definitely approached, or I'm positive they probably approached him and it could be an issue of amount of money and length of contract. And with the Saudi deal, maybe in the back of their minds, they probably want a longer deal from Liverpool to maybe Mo Salah would probably want to retire in Liverpool. Like maybe that's kind of how they're doing it on the agents, the representation of Mo Salah. Now Liverpool looks at it and he's a winger forward, wide forward, that he's 32, he's going to turn 33. They may not be that keen on giving him a very long contract. So that may be something there with the length of the contract with him. Mm-hmm. And it's normal. Like I think if you are running a team, you would think about it the same way. Wingers and forwards like him, the way he plays, his age is not where he's going to get any better. I think as you go further along, I think you would think his effectiveness is going to decrease. So then you're cautious about giving a longer deal, cautious about giving a big deal and tying yourself up for multiple years. So that could be one with Mo. With Van Dijk, I think it's somewhat of a similar conversation, but because he's a center back, I think there's a little bit more leeway. And as you mentioned, he's the one that's been the most steady presence for them in an injury ravaged season at that position. And still, he's also getting up in age, so that could be another one where a difference in where they see or what the length of the contract they see, how they want to, between the two parties. And I don't know for sure, but I thought there were some rumors that there may be some Saudi interest in him, but obviously I don't think it was as widely publicized as Mo Salah's, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now coming to Trent, I think this one for me, to some degree, I would be surprised if they haven't already are in advanced stages, if they aren't already in advanced stages of a new deal for him, just because he's coming into his prime, or he's in his prime. He's at 25, fullback, he's in his prime. Very important player for the team, highly productive. So I would be surprised if they haven't, if they aren't in advanced negotiations with him to extend his new deal. Also, looking at, even with the change in the manager, Arne Slot played with the right back at Feyenoord with similar qualities. I think when we talked about Trent's or Real Madrid's interest in Trent, we thought that could be the move if that were to actually happen. Then I can't get Troida, that's his name.
Geertruida,
yeah. Yeah, someone like that. So it's not that the coach wants to play a different style or he doesn't fit in his plan. So I don't think that's the case here. So my guess is that we may hear about this after the window closes, that, hey, this is a new deal for, we just agreed on a new deal for Trent. That's kind of how I feel. What do you think?
I think that Liverpool will have made an offer to Trent. I guess the question is, how much money does he want and how tempted is he by Real Madrid? So I don't think that he's reached this stage because Liverpool have been remiss, in trying to get him to the negotiating table. I just think that maybe he's thinking, I could just go to Real Madrid next year and have half a career there. And to be honest with you, probably get paid less at Real Madrid. Like Liverpool will pay him a fortune. And Real Madrid actually don't tend to go crazy with wages, except for like their really top guys, right? But you can see the appeal. Given that there's the kind of part of me that thinks it'll just get done because he's also a boyhood Liverpool fan, and uprooting yourself and going off to Spain is very appealing from a footballing perspective, but it might not be appealing from a personal point of view. I think with Van Dijk and Salah, I assume that it's really just that Liverpool maybe want to give them, maybe like a 1+1 to Van Dijk or something, maybe a 2+1 to Salah, and Salah's like, I'm still kind of a superstar, and people want to pay me like a superstar, so pay me that way or I'll go. And honestly, I think the public opinion on this is changing. But previously, 3 or 4 years ago, it felt like it was really terrible for a player to leave on a free, and there's still a little bit of that attitude. But I remember, for example, Aubameyang getting that huge deal very late on at Arsenal. There's been a similar thing around Son at Spurs. Getting yourself locked into one of these contracts for one of these guys, no matter how good they are, ultimately, I don't think it's worth it. I think it's better to move on and accept that you might have a little bit of time in the wilderness. You drop a couple of places. To me, that's better than really reducing your maneuverability, I guess, in terms of your squad building.
I agree. I think that's literally probably what they're looking at. Is they're looking at the squad as a whole, and managing how does it look in 25, 26? How does it look in 26, 27? And what doing X in 24, 25 will make us how we will look in the next couple of seasons. I think they are definitely looking at things or in that horizon and seeing how this will affect that. So yeah, obviously there are players that you have to give longer contracts, especially if you're someone like Trent. They probably have no problem giving him a long contract. But if you're talking about someone entering 30s, or he's kind of well past 30s in 32, 33, then you're more wary because you don't want to get tied up in the future.
The interesting thing, I think, is that Saudi Arabia is the kind of stalking horse here. It's always, well, maybe this guy will go to Saudi, but while we've heard a lot of talk about Saudi Arabia this summer, we actually haven't seen a ton of moves there. It doesn't feel like a bunch of players have evaporated like happened last year.
Yeah, no, I think part of it is that the feedback they probably heard from the players that have moved there. I was listening to an interview from, I think, Aymeric Laporte, the French centre back. Sorry, the Spanish centre back, right?
Well, bit of both.
Yeah, the French Spanish, bit of both. The Basque centre back, I guess. He was talking about like just how different it is and how he wasn't prepared for that, and how a lot of things are promised, or that these things will change, like more not about the money but more about the training conditions and living conditions, and it's not that easy to go and live in a country where the culture is different and also very strict in many ways. As much as you have your conclaves of maybe Europeans and in one place and all that, but still it doesn't feel the same as living in Madrid or London or Manchester. So I think
Sure.
that's probably what has given a pause for a lot of these players, that the move hasn't happened. Now I've heard some crazy rumor, or maybe it was actually the offer was there, that Vinicius Jr. got an offer of up to $1 billion contract, something like that, but he didn't take it. I mean, so it's I do think that that part, the feedback now coming from the first wave of superstars that have gone there is having an impact on this. That's the second wave, to think more about it. Is this my last option? Is this my last paycheck? Or is this maybe those are the people that probably want to go think more and serious about it? But like players in the prime probably are not going to be going there, I think.
And I think as well, like there might be kind of continental difference there too, because, for example, when China became a destination for a load of players, it was a lot of guys who were looking for last big paychecks, but there's also a lot of South American players, it felt, going there. And I think there's probably an attitude among European players that they're like, if I play at the top level, I will spend the majority of my career in Europe, so within a few hours of whatever country I grew up in. And then maybe if I want at the end of my career, there'll be like a trip to the US or something. But the idea of spending your whole career much, much further away is kind of alien, I think, to European players. Whereas I think in Latin America, there is the sense of like, you're probably going to go to Europe. Maybe there's more of a sort of mental comfort with, well, if I go somewhere else, it doesn't really make that difference to me because I'm still miles away from where I grew up.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. And I think when South Americans come to Europe, they are generally, I think there is the superstars that are different. But if you come the second, the group below the superstars that move to Europe, they end up I think that it's not all, they're not making life-changing money in Europe. If you look at it. Like, a good example is for Argentinian players that don't get that, that are not in that top elite group that get big transfers. Playing in Mexico, they probably get paid more than moving to Europe. A lot of Mexican players playing in Mexico, the Mexican national team players playing in Mexico, they probably get more money than playing in Europe.
Sure.
And that's one of the reasons. It's another kind of longer topic, but that's one of the reasons there is the view that Mexican national team is considerably weaker now because a lot of the players are playing in Mexico because they get paid more in Mexico. So, or now MLS, like they're playing, like Chucky Lozano is moving from Europe, from PSV to San Diego, the new MLS franchise that's going to start playing next season. So he was one of the biggest stars who is playing in Europe. Now he's going to move to MLS. So that's a different topic. So But anyway, there is that too, that, you know, when those second level players from South America move to Europe, they need another kind of maybe 2-3 years of really working hard and proving themselves to get that big contract.
That's interesting. Oh, well, these are sort of things I've never really thought about. But yeah, it does feel like there's been a kind of paucity of Mexican players coming to Europe in the last few years. And I suppose with the incentive structured that way, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that wraps us for today. Unless there's anything else that you want to hit on before we leave, I think we're done.
Yep, that's it, I think.
Great. Well, thank you for another episode, Ravi. It's always great to talk to you. And I suppose we'll be back next week. Maybe we can do a bit of an MLS wrap up at some stage. That'll be interesting. Always good to have another episode where I look as ignorant as possible. But I would appreciate that.
No, it's always great to talk to you. And, you know, in terms of the questions you bring up or the ideas you have, I think it was always a give and take. I learn a lot just listening to you.
Oh, thanks, Ravi. Well, if you've learned something from this podcast, if you've enjoyed it, then please do subscribe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app, leave us reviews, engage with us on our social media accounts. We're always looking for questions. We're always looking for interesting topics. Once the season starts, especially, we will be bringing you different angles and not just transfer reviews, but we'll probably do some grading of clubs' transfer windows. We'll obviously look at tactics, match breakdowns, all those sorts of things. And obviously continue to read the newsletter. The newsletter's been absolutely fantastic later. Also check out that Ryan O'Hanlon article that I mentioned on ESPN. That's a really good read and should convince you that Arsenal might win the league. Thank you very much for listening.
Season's starting tomorrow, Patrick. I think.
Oh, God.
The Premier League.
God, it is, isn't it?
La Liga is today.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, no. I need like another month off. Okay. Well,
cool.
Plenty of content coming down the pipeline. Thanks very much. And we'll see you guys soon. Bye.
Bye.